So the approaches of SHRM. Authors have attempted to provide more analytical framework for strategic human resource management. Delry and Doughty, 1996. For example, distinguish between three different theoretical frameworks: universalistic, where some HR practices are believed to be universally effective. This approach proffers common standard individual HR practices and treats them as principles, claiming verifiably and consistent applicability. Scholars contend that the errors is in oversimplifying organizational reality. This does not explain complex systems interactions and has a rather isomorphic than differentiating effect. Colbert, 2004. Contingency, where effectiveness of HR practices is taken as dependent on organization strategy, systems interaction, and achievement of vertical fit. Regarding policies, it goes beyond a simple linear causal relationship for prescription of HR practices and allows for interaction effects and varying intervariable relationships. System interaction effects. During strategy formation, the stress is on achieving vertical fit or integration of policy through hierarchic levels and its consistent alignment with the strategy. The idea of horizontal fit envisions HR practices as hanging together as a coherent self-reinforcing system. Colbert, 2004. Configurational, where there is a believed to be synergistic or mutually reinforcing relations between HR practices and strategic that are crucial for enhanced performance, whereby researchers gather data regarding multiple dimensions of organizations such as strategies, structures, cultures, and processes into topologies of ideal types, and treat the types as independent variables. This approach therefore gives patterns of HR practices that together form an internally consistent whole. Ideal type model building is attempted whereby few possible system configurations are developed. It then correlates patterns with performance. However, configurational approach confines real life possibilities into two or three systems types, which might not in practice cover real life possibilities. Colbert, 2004. Ritt and Snell's 1998 model of SHRM aims to achieve both fit and flexibility. They emphasize distinction between HRM practices, skills, and behavior in relation to strategy on the one hand, and the issue of tight and loose coupling of HR practices and strategy on the other. The best practice approach. This approach is based on the belief that there exists a set of best HRM practices which potentially lead to superior organizational performance. Perhaps the best known set is Preferred's 1994 list of the 7 HR practices in organizational successful organizations. Employment security. This implies employee security in the face of exigencies like economic downturns or the strategic errors of senior management on which they have little or no control. It is fundamental to the implementation of such high performance management practices as selective hiring, extensive training, information sharing, and delegation. Companies are unlikely to invest in the screening and training of employees who are not expected to stay long enough for the firm to recoup its investment. And if the policy is to avoid layoffs, the company will hire sparingly selective hiring. Selective recruitment is needed to minimize training costs. Organizations should look for people with the right attitude, values, and cultural attributes that may be hard to inculcate by training. Management should also be able to predict the employee's performance and likelihood of the employee training with the company for a long term. Self-managed teams, they are a critical component of high performance management systems. They substitute peer-based control for hierarchical control of work, lessen tiers in hierarchy, and permit employees to pool their ideas in order to produce better and more creative solutions to work problems. High compensation contingent on performance. Compensation offered to employees is made contingent on organizational performance. For example, gain sharing or profit sharing can be related to individual or team performance or even unique or particular individual skills. Training. Virtually all descriptions of high performance work practices emphasize the role of training in providing needed skills and creating a motivated workforce that has the knowledge and the capability to perform required tasks. Reduction of status differentials. The fundamental premise of high performance work systems is that the organization should be able to tap ideas, skills, and efforts of its employees. For this to be possible, Status differentials should not be emphasized to the detriment of team spirit in an organization. Sharing information, this is an essential component of high performance work systems for two chief reasons. First, the sharing of information on the firm's financial performance and business strategies sends a positive message across to employees that they are valued. Second, even motivated and trained people cannot contribute to organizational performance if they do not have information on important aspects of performance and training in interpreting and using that information. Many scholars do not subscribe to the best practice theory. They believe that the notion of a single set of best practices have been overstated. Purcell 1999 has also criticized the best practice or the universalistic view by pointing out the inconsistency between beliefs in the best practice on one hand and resource-based view (RBV) on the other. Since the former focuses on the intangibles, including HR, that allows a firm to perform better than its competitors and later on treating people as resource, while the former emphasizes generalist perspective to achieving high performance, the later targets specific resources. He asked how the universalism of best practices can be squared with the view that only some resources and routines are valued because of being rare and imperfectly immutable. In accordance with the contingency theory, it is difficult to accept that there is any such thing as universal best practice. What works well in one organization may not be necessarily work well in another because it may not fit its strategic culture, management style, technology requirement, or working practice. As Becker 1997 remarks, organizational high performance work systems are highly idiosyncratic and must be tailored carefully to each firm's individual requirement in order that it achieves optimum results. But knowledge of best practice, as long as it is known what makes it best practice, should inform decisions uh, on what course of action should be adopted by the organization. And Becker and Gerhard, 1996, argue that the idea of the best practice underlies and the choice of practice as opposed to practices themselves. It is more a choice criterion rather than the characteristic of practices in an organization. Best fit. For the reason given above, best fit it is considered more appropriate than best practice. This is not to say that good practice or leading edge practice that does well in one successful environment should be ignored. Benchmarking has its uses as a means of identifying areas for innovation or development practice applied to a good effect elsewhere. But having learned what works and what does not work in similar situations, the organization has to decide what general policy should be adopted and what lessons can be learned to make the adopted idea fit its own particular strategic and operational requirements. The requirement is an analysis of the business needs of the organization within its own particular context, cultural, structural, technology, and process, indicating clearly what has to be done. Thereafter, it may be useful to adopt a mix of various best practices ingredients to develop an approach which applies practices that are appropriate in a way that is conducive to identified business needs. However, there are problems with the best fit approach as stated by Purcell 1999, who having rubbished the concept of best practices proceeds to the same for best fit. The search for a contingency or matching model of HRM is limited by the difficulty of modeling all contingent variables, the difficulty of showing their interconnections, and the way in which changes in one variable impact others. In Purcell's view, an organizations, though be less concerned with best fit and best practice and be more sensitive to the process or organizational change to avoid being trapped in the logical of rational choice, it may be notable that rational choice argument does not always apply in real life situations. A strategy's success therefore depends on combining vertical or external fit with horizontal or internal fit. A firm with better HR practices should have higher levels of performance, provided it also achieves high levels of fit with its competitive strategy. This brings out the importance of bundling, that is the development and implementation of several HR practices in unison, so they are interrelated, complementing and reinforcing each other. The process is referred to as the use of complementarities or the adoption of a configurational mode. Implicit in the notion of bundle is the idea that practices within bundles are interrelated and made internally consistent, and that the impact on performance is positive because of the overlapping and mutually reinforcing effects of multiple practices. One might argue that the logic in favor of bundling is a straightforward one. Since employee performance is a function of both ability and motivation, it makes sense to have practices among aimed at enhancing both thus there are several ways in which employees could be made to acquire the required skills to augment ability and administer multiple um, incentives to enhance, induce and reinforce motivation. A study by Dyer Reeves 1995 of the various models listing HR practices that create a link between HRM and business performance revealed that activities appearing in most successful models were involvement, careful selection, extensive training, and contingent compensation. On the basis of his research in flexible production manufacturing plants in the States, McDuffie in 1995 noted that flexible production mode gives employees a much more central role in the production system. They have to resolve problems as they arise. That is at the level at which they appear in the line. It means they have to possess both the conceptual grasp of production process and the analytical skill to identify the root cause of the problem. Multiple skills and conceptual knowledge developed by the workforce in flexible production organizations would be of little use unless workers are motivated to contribute in both mental and physical capacities. Such willing effort will only be applied by workers if they believe that their individual interests are aligned with those of the company and the company would make a reciprocal investment in their well-being. Flexible production techniques have to be supported by high commitment human resource practices like employment security and good pay, which, if neglected, create barriers between the management and workers. Company investment in building worker um, skills through training and positive commitment research indicates that plants using flexible production and business strategy outperform plants using more traditional mass production systems in case of both productivity and quality. The aim of bundling is to achieve coherence in organizational practice. Coherence is attained when a mutually reinforcing set of HR policies and practices is developed which contributes to the attainment of organizations' strategies for matching resources to organizational needs, improving performance and quality, and in commercial enterprises achieving competitive advantage. In a sense, strategic HRM is holistic in that it is concerned with the organization as a total entity and addresses that what needs to be done across the organization as a whole to achieve corporate strategic objectives. It avoids isolated programs and techniques and ad hoc development HR programs. David Guest, 1989, in his set of propositions for HRM, stresses the idea that strategic integration is about the ability of the organization to ensure that the various aspects of HRM are coherent. One way of looking at the concept is to say that some measure of coherence will be achieved if there is an overriding strategic imperative or a driving force such as customer service, quality performance, or the need to develop skills and competencies. And this initiates various processes and policies designed to link together and operate as one integrated policy to deliver certain specific results. For example, if the driving force were to improve performance, competence profiling techniques could be used to specify recruitment standard of behavior or performance required. The competence framework would be used as the basis of human resource planning and development activities. The same could be incorporated into performance management process in which the aim is primarily developmental, in which competence is used as a criterion for reviewing and behavior and assessing learning and development needs. The major problem with the bundling approach is deciding the best way to relate different practices. There is no evidence that one bundle is generally better than the other. Although the use of performance management practices and competence framework are two ways typically adopted to provide for coherence across a range of HR activities, there is no conclusive proof that bundling actually improves performance. The general models describing the best practice, best fit, and configuration approaches provide a useful conceptual framework which can help in the analysis and development of strategic HRM practices. The other models analyzed in this unit are perspective and should be treated with caution. They describe best practices under various headings. This may be of interest and be helpful to practitioners looking for a starting point in the development of people management and development strategy, but for reasons given earlier, best practice approach suffers from limitations. Best fit is perhaps more helpful as it allows for the influence of distinctive business strategies such as specific sector strategies and adjustments to market or economic forces. Anyone or a combination of these approaches would prove helpful in the development of strategy Although emerging consensus favors that have become known as the high performance management approach, but it will still be necessary to consider how such an approach or any other model is likely to be most appropriate in a particular organizational circumstances. Resource-based view. Strategic human resource management is an extensive of the resource-based view (RBV) of a competitive advantage of a firm or an organization. Colbert 2004 proponents of RBV argue that sustained competitive advantages originates in an organization resource base, thereby drawing attention to the internal working of an enterprise. Strategic human resource management therefore emphasizes the role of the manager. Optimizing human and material resource comes under the functions of the executive. RBB has helped to build a productive theoretical bridge between the fields of strategy and HRM. It has been an integrative framework for optimizing use of human material resource for sustained competitive edge. Barney 1991. Models of SHRM. There are a number of models within the rubric of perspective and descriptive, which within the framework of the concept of strategic human resource management form various approaches to the concept's theoretical development and practical implementation. First, there are those that refer to general approaches to strategic human resource management. Second, there are also that prescribe particular approaches to the practice of strategic HRM, namely resource capability, high performance management, high performance working, high commitment management, and high involvement management. The models of SHRM are either prescriptive or descriptive. As per Guest's model of 1987, HRM can be derived empirically and conceptually from analysis of individual practices over time, leading to testable positions. And finally, prescription of policy. There are four key elements or goals of strategy human resource management as identified by Guest. These are integration, commitment, flexibility, quality. Guest's model, however, takes little account of contextual circumstances such as impact of situational and environmental factors on organizational practice. The other major paradigm is a functional, which draws upon functionalist sociologists propounded by Comte. It follows the positive tradition adapting biological concepts to sociologic anthropologists Malinowski and Radcliffe's Brown, 1952 emphasized social order, stability, and continuity of the organic whole. The chief argument is that society holds together, underpinned by the notion of purposive rationality, transporting the concept to organizational life. Hence, functionalism aims at the establishment of objective knowledge. The purpose of HRM, accordingly, to is to sustain organizational coherence by way of integration between sections constituting an organization through strategy. The high performance working model. High performance working models involve working involves the development of a number of interrelated approaches which together impact favorably on the performance of the firm in areas like productivity, quality, and levels of customer service, growth, profits, and delivery, and increased shareholder value. This is achieved by enhancing the skills and engaging the enthusiasm of employees in goal accomplishment. The strategic point is leadership vision and benchmarking to create momentum and identify a direction for measuring progress constantly. It involves structural and cultural stipulation to that end. Guest suggests that the main drivers of support system or culture are and decentralized decision making, especially at the cutting edge level, so as to constantly renew and improve offers or services made to customers or people in general. Development of people capacities through induced learning at all levels, with particular emphasis on self management and team capability to enable and support performance improvement and enhance organizational potential. Performance operational people management processes are aligned to organizational objectives to build trust, enthusiasm, and commitment towards the direction of course of action adopted by the organization. Fair treatment of those who leave the organization mid course and engagement with the need of the community outside the organization. This is an important component of trust and commitment based relationships both within and outside the organization. And high performance management practices that include rigorous recruitment and selection procedures, extensive and relevant training and management and development activities, and incentive pay systems and performance management process. In the United States, this approach is described as the use of high performance work systems or practices. The characteristics of a high performance work systems have been defined by the United States Department of Labor. Careful and extensive recruitment, selection, training, formal system for information sharing with the Individuals who work in the organization, clear job design, high level participation process, monitoring attitudes and studying behavior, regular performance appraisals, properly functioning grievance redress system, and promotion and compensation schemes that provide for recognition and financial rewards for high performing members of the workforce. High performance working involves the adoption of high performance design methods. These require certain steps in a logical sequence as stated below. Management clearly defines what it needs by way of new methods of working and articulation of results expected. Management extends success parameters in that it continually sets goals and standards for enhanced success. Multi-skill acquisition is encouraged, and encouragement and training are provided for employee to acquire new skills. Equipment is selected that can be used flexibly and allows easy handling for optimizing the socio-technical technical systems aspects of organization. Establishment of self-managed teams or autonomous work groups for better human relations, adoption of supportive rather than autocratic style. This is most difficult part of the system to introduce. The leadership to support innovative and initiative on the part of employees. Support systems are provided that help teams function effectively as operating units. The new system is introduced with the care through employee involvement and communication programs for the employee empowerment. So training is based an objective assessment of training needs. Payment system is designed with employee participation to fit employee needs as well as those of the management. Payment is related to team performance, team pay, but with provision for skill-based pay for individuals. And in some cases, peer performance review processes used, which involves team members assessing one another's performance as well as the performance of the team as a whole. The high commitment management model. One of the defining characteristics of HRM is its emphasis on the importance of enhancing mutual commitment among contributors. High commitment management may be described as a form of management that aims at eliciting commitment so that behavior is primarily self-regulated rather than controlled by sanctions and pressures applied by the management, and relations within the organization are based on high levels of trust. Ways to achieve high commitment are development of leadership through training with the premium or on commitment as a highly valued characteristics at all levels in the organization. A high level of functional flexibility, abandoning potentially rigid jobs descriptions, reduction of hierarchies, and de-emphasis of the status differentials. A heavy reliance on team infrastructure for disseminating information, team briefing, designing and distributing work, team working and problem solving, quality circles, understanding job design as an area of management craft to provide intrinsic satisfaction to workers. A policy of no compulsory layoffs and a permanent employment guarantee with the possible use of temporary workers to withstand fluctuation in the demand of labor. New forms of assessment and payment systems, more specifically merit pay and profit sharing, and high degree of involvement of employees in the model. While commitment might still suggest subjugation, this model is more democratic in approach in that it involves treating employees as partners in the enterprise whose interests are respected and who have a voice in matters concerning or relating to them. There is focus on communication and participation with the aim of creating a climate in which continuing dialogue between managers and members of their teams is continually maintained in order to retreat or revise expectations as the case may be, and consistently share information on the organization's mission, values, and objectives. This establishes full mutual understanding of what is desired by both management and workers, and also establishes the means of managing and developing employee potential to ensure target accomplishment through better involvement across the region. Specifically, the following structural and functional attributes are desired: online work teams, offline employee involvement activities and problem solving groups, job rotation, suggestion programs, decentralization of quality efforts. Clear evidence emerged from the above recount that high involvement work practices results in superior performance, although there might be tremendous variance in actual application. High involvement work practices have a clear and demonstrated effect on productivity. The effect is large enough to be of economic consequence and a significance to be to the organizations that adopt these new practices. Conclusion: the key derivatives from this discussion are strategic human resource management implies linking HR practices with organizational strategy. There is a need for a theoretical framework of SHRM research and theory building. SHRM is interdisciplinary systems and contingency paradigms can be gleaned from the literature of SHRM. As a practical philosophy, it's driving forces efficiency, that is more revenue, less cost. It is also qualitative as it stresses on augmenting quality of human resource and ethical practice. It imparts economy and coherence to organizational functioning. Cognition is defined as the psychological result of perception, learning, and reasoning. Cognition has a wider organizational climate ramifications than positive. Cognition depends organizational survival and health. Cognition develops over time with cognition on the part of people is a part of organizational structure. Negative cognition can lead to impairment of employee capacity and also adversely affect his attitude towards colleagues and organizational ethics in general. Fit a strategy is successful if it fits with other decisions in an organization in terms of compatibility between demand and supply, resource use, result orientedness, and integration with wider organizational functioning. Organizational policy has to move forward in a concerted way, in that integrating decisions taken at different policy and operating levels. Strategy is fit if it answers the aforesaid requirement. Strategic, the word strategy is used to denote targetedness on a policy or a measure as against general policy. Strategic planning or policy involves systematic, result oriented, and methodical activity on the part of organizations towards predetermined or preset goals or end. Strategy has to be continually addressed for relevance in face of contingent environmental factors as per the needs of situation.